Hello, old-timers and newcomers. I am so tired. But I am so happy to finally be here at the third and final part of The Glassmaker's Children, a complete review. It's early morning by the roadside as the coachman stops by a convenient tree. He carries a store of paper neatly rolled into a bundle of cylinders by the servant's proper hands. A request made by the Lord to be spread far and wide in every ordinal direction from the castle. He's about ready to strike the nail into the tree for the note, when Kloke swoops in and lifts it out of his hands faster than he can react. With the night on his heels, he flies for the day, and returns to Pt3a to share the scroll of paper with her. Miraculous woman, wise to the magical arts, immediately sought. Personal abode with a stargazing scope. Signed, the Lord. It's barely in Pt3a's power not to throw the paper back at Kloke. She sent him out to know, not to come dragging with litter. But she calms herself and asks him what he's seen. He remains quiet. Turn away from her. Only the empty socket looks back at her.
Såg du ingenting alls? Kan ju inte se månen utanför fönstret längre.
Nej, men barnen.
The children. Nothing more. Was everything that dark? The humble fire burning bright can no longer hold back the cold. It creeps from the inside to wash through Pt3a as the bottomless black pits of the weave stares back at her. You need your night's eye back, Kloke. It was hard for me to pick and choose what to include in this interaction because either part feels broken without the other. As a kid, I of course found Kloke's mood to be very amusing throughout the film. A mad raven squawking nonsense. It was a little bit like jiggling car keys in front of my face. Of course I liked that as a kid. So seeing him so struck down really sent a chill up my spine. It really broke my heart, as did Pt3a's reaction to the situation. Her hearing that the one thing Kloke can see with his one good eye is the children, that everything else is pitch black, making her understand how awful the situation is. It was really depressing. It really made me lose hope at the time. So let's remind ourselves that this is still a kid's film, because at this point it feels like anything goes. Grief doesn't stall the world, or even the needs of a household. It's with a tired resignation Sophia pulls the pail out of the well and ladles its water into the house. Things go on the way they always have, with the chores of the house being done and sleep awaiting at night. Anxious, agonizing sleep, sordidly interrupted by nightmares she can only remember flashes and notions of. But this time it's more. She wakes to a voice, a familiar voice, so clear she wonders if it was a dream at all. All it said to her was, "Dear child," calling her attention. She can't remember more. She gets up and pours the water from the well into a bowl, letting her rinse herself of the nightmares. The cold moonlight waddles on the raddled water's surface, hurtfully stinging her eyes and chasing her sleep away. It's mesmerizingly bright and cold, bright as a mirror reflecting the sun, cold as the bottom of the ocean. For a moment, it seems deeper and darker than the bowl, like she's staring at the surface of a well, but as the water calms down and the surface clears, the bottom reveals itself through the moonlight. And lying at the bottom is a silver ring, crested with a deep black pearl, staring at her through the moonlit water. It's the ring she threw away those years ago. That pitch-black jewel that had worried her so. The ring Albert had bought her the day the man bought all their glass. And Pt3a... Sophia becomes still, willing the memory back. Careful, as if worried she'll lose it in the cold blackness again, she slowly grasps it and gently pulls it into the light. She remembers seeing Pt3a, and she remembers her warning. Dear child, you carry a ring on your finger, Ofelia. Send me the ring if misfortune should ever befall you, and I will help you. Barely has the shawl gripped her shoulders before she's out the door, running through the night towards the house at Pt3a hill. She doesn't bother with a lantern or even following the road. Instead, her rapid feet carries her through the forest itself, not allowing anything to impede her. Despite her desperation, when she reaches the house and knocks on the door, a frightful calm overtakes her. That memory of the market, of Pt3a promising to help, it's all she has. It carried her through the night to the witch's doorstep. It was a momentary realization there is something she could do. She's not sure what would happen or how it would help, but just knowing there is something she could do was enough to take her here. But what is there for her to do? The door unlocks and the old witch appears on the doorstep, lit by fire behind her and moonlight before her. It's she who would do everything, not Ofelia. She can't do any more than hand her the ring and hope. Hope in hopelessness. But it's what she can do. Slowly she opens her hand and offers the evil, unfortunate jewelry to Pt3a. Help me, she whispers. Wide-eyed, the old witch stares at her before she gently takes the ring from Ophelia's hand and looks at the woman. Her expression doesn't change. She looks as shocked and alerted as when Ofelia first showed the ring to her. Somehow Ofelia knows that whatever happens next, Pt3a will keep her promise, and she will help her, whatever that may mean. Having done the one thing she could, Ofelia turns around and returns to the night. Pt3a Mildväder remains, gathering her thoughts. With the one thing she needed to finally act, she throws the paper scroll in the fire and announces to Kloke they are leaving. I suspect you may have figured out what the ring is by now, and the book wasn't subtle about it either, but even in the book it's never explained how the salesman got his hands on the ring. The closest to an explanation we get is it implies some sort of mystique about the salesman. Like, he may have been some kind of folkloric creature, like a knock, or a Pt3a, or a dwarf, or an elf. But by itself, that doesn't explain it. Time is of no consequence to their journey. It takes the time it takes for Pt3a to reach the castle and be received with the open doors by the grave visage of the Lord. The goings-on at the castle is unimportant to her charge, so the Lord never mentions it. What he does is explain that Pt3a is here to use her magic to make the lady wish again. A peculiar request, but she doesn't argue it. She just agrees that wishes are important before she goes to meet the lady. Even though not much happens in this scene, I still really like seeing their interaction. Partly because we're finally getting into the nitty-gritty of the film's themes. Mostly because, having seen this movie a million times, I really only feel sorry for the lady, even though I have been given every reason in the world to dislike her. And this is really the scene I should have saved my rant regarding her character for, because this is the scene where she finally starts opening up. Without giving the old woman a glance of her eye, the lady berates and disregards her. She knows the witch isn't really here for the lady's betterment, but for the Lord's satisfaction, to make her chirp, "Thank you, thank you, thank you."
Så enkelt är inte livet. Jag kan lösa allt med lite hokus pokus.
I appreciate that statement on several levels. First of all, it's more intelligent than how in the book the lady just berated Pt3a Mildväder for thinking she could use magic to make the woman wish again. I mean, it's kind of similar to how it was worded in the book, but it's different enough that the meanings are different from one another. And further on, fantasy in general is laden with escapism and power fantasies. In one way or another, a well-timed swing of the wand usually can solve every character's problems. Not always, but most of the time. And I'm not one to claim that entertainment creates unrealistic expectations. I'd like to think that living life generally removes any and all expectations. They are beaten out of you, really. But it's still refreshing to see a fantasy movie where all of the characters' issues can't be solved with magic. And thirdly, I feel much better today. But in my late teens, I struggled a lot with depression. And one of the things that I remember most clearly is feeling guilty for feeling sad when I had no reason to. And that is what the lady is going through. And if you don't think she doesn't feel guilty...
Jag är fåfäng, förstår mamsell, men jag är inte dum. Härskaren däremot, han är både fåfäng och dum. Det är därför han kan vara så snäll också.
Clearly she's not torn to shreds about it. But she recognizes the Lord isn't deliberately trying to hurt her, he just doesn't know any better. He's a lifelong aristocrat who has only ever been surrounded by shallow vanity. So, yeah, he just doesn't know any better. But for her to recognize that his shallow gifts are meaningless, that implies something more about her. Yeah, at the very least, if you accept that people aren't more than the life they have lived.
Men det kan inte jag. Jag är född elak. Elak, elak, elak.
I hardly need a long-winded rant to explain why anyone who claims they are mean isn't actually mean, right? It's a mask you put on to protect yourself, to feel better about yourself, or possibly to make others feel sorry about you. Probably a bit of both.
Jag är elak, hörde inte mamsell? Varför säger inte mamsell emot mig? Ni ska säga emot mig!
In this case, I think the lady herself thinks she is mean. And she is trying to bait Flaxa into disagreeing with her to make her feel better about herself. Of course, Flaxa doesn't play her game. In the book, Flaxa outright states she is accustomed to agreeing with what people say, like she did with the Lord when he asked her to make the lady start wishing again. But in baiting Flaxa to disagree with her or become angry with her, and Flaxa refusing, the lady inadvertently reveals she actually needs help because she's trying to get the woman's attention. Flaxa refuses to make conversation with the lady for as long as the lady doesn't look at her, making her angrier and angrier until eventually she gives in to her anger and almost gets out of bed to address the woman. She stops herself at the edge of her seat, feeling caught in a trap before she raises her head to take the old woman in. She's not sure what she expects. Sadness, anger, mockery. None of those meet her, however, but only a quiet, friendly smile on the old woman's face. The lady's whole body rattled with a thunderous rumble that suddenly crashes through the room. Shocked, Flaxa looks around the room to realize it's not just here. The noise resounds from the depths of the castle, crawling through the corridors, shaking the walls. Defeated, the lady reaches for her nightstand to grab an entire handful of medicine with a gulp of water, before she pleads and orders Flaxa to leave and get away. She does leave, but only the room, as she follows the rumble through the pallid corridors. The noise only thickens the deeper she goes into the dock, when a shrill peal screams out above her. Discordant and wailing, it guides her upwards the stairs. Water meets her feet like 1,000 tears raining down every step, until she sees the broken red vase lying shattered on its pedestal. Further into the din she goes, the sound like a tremendous beast aggressively growling from its lair. A lair devoid of life and color, with only the deep, cold stone closing in around her. When Kloke lands on her arm, the act frightens her. But the familiar's one good eye looks to her for comfort. In the now, Kloke is all but blind to the world around him, this close to the darkness radiating across the building. Steadied, she strides forth in spite of Kloke's worried whimpers, and opens the door to where the sound comes from. The sight before her almost makes her falter. The room is shook back and forth by resonant gales, spurred on by the growling snorts and rasses of the great beast hid by the billowing veils of the bed. From the creature runs a chain about its wrist, stretched taut around the side of the bed, to two pallid forms sleeping fitfully in what could only be pained exhaustion. The children look like they've been scrubbed with iron wool, bleached and ragged like all color has been hewn off of them. The young boy looks towards her, but not at her. He looks straight through her like she's not even there. But the young girl does see her. She even straightens up to look more closely, like she's trying to see if Flaxa is even there. Kloke's brief comfort falters. His one blind eye, the one sightless in the presence of this evil, fixes on the bright white cockatoo helplessly trying to balance itself in the force of the creature's breathing, before he takes flight and flees out of the room. But Flaxa Mildväder stays, to peel back the veil from the headboard and behold the face she dreaded to see. Quickly, before those 15 minutes will have ended, she retreats back to her room. She knew it. It's Nana. The misbegotten. The evil.
Ska jag kunna rädda barnen? Jag är inte säker längre.
It's worth mentioning in the book, Flaxa's attitude towards Nana isn't unlike my attitude towards the lady, thinking of her as lost more than evil. She feels sorry for her more than she's repulsed by her. However, she still didn't trust her, and she didn't think she could be reasoned with. So, it's a minor change, but it's one that helps build up the threat Nana radiates all the more, like she's truly beyond help. Unlike the lady.
Ni kallade på mig.
Mamsell ska säga härskarinnan.
Den som inte härskar över sig själv är ingen härskarinna.
Hur vågar mamsell?
With Flaxa having gotten one over on the lady, so to speak, the lady seeks to reassert control by doing what anyone in her position always does, making demands and giving orders. The thing is, her status as the lady is entirely fictitious and doesn't really exist beyond her wealth. From a narrative standpoint, I only call them the Lord and Lady out of convenience. Härskare literally means ruler, without being too specific, and they're very clearly not royalty. They're not even aristocrats, actually. Best as I can tell is they're supposed to be some sort of landowners, but feudalism hasn't been a thing in Sweden for hundreds of years, so yeah, their status as the Lord and Lady is entirely fictitious beyond their wealth. The thing is, the lady has lived in this reality where that isn't the case for so long that she has forgotten that people only give her the respect they offer her. Flaxa may be the first person she has met in years who doesn't treat her like her status is real. And even if she doesn't realize it, that may be exactly what she needs right about now. Put like that, it actually sounds like cinema cliché number 32, where the closed-off, depressed protagonist is broken out of her shell by a loudmouth asshole. But I don't mind that too much. First of all, because the book this movie is based on was written in a time when tropes was not something people talked about with any kind of fervor. And secondly, Flaxa is not a loudmouth asshole, so yeah, I don't mind it whatsoever.
Alltså på det viset. Då måste jag uppfostra mamsell.
Det lönar sig inte.
I så fall lönar det sig inte att försöka få mig att önska heller.
Det bryr jag mig inte om.
As we all know, Flaxa's only real concern is the children, with the Lord's mission serving as an excuse to be at the castle. So it seems like she's giving up all pretenses, but that's not entirely it. Nana is the source of all of their misery right now, but so is the Lord and Lady to an extent, so solving one issue will bring her one step closer to saving the children. Admitting she doesn't actually care about the lady's wishes throws the lady off, because that was the one thing she had to lord over Flaxa, the one sense of control she had, and now that last bit of control is taken away from her.
Finns viktigare saker i livet.
Hur kan man själv säga så? Vad skulle vara viktigare än mina önskningar?
The wishes they're talking about are of course all shallow, And while the lady is smart enough to realize being given whatever she wants isn't making her happy, she is still vain enough to not move beyond it. Flaxa, however, is wise enough to realize being given whatever a person wants isn't enough to make a person happy, and it's foolishness to assume being given whatever a person wishes for will make them happy. The lady doesn't realize that yet, but she is about to.
Det mesta är viktigare än människors önskningar.
Irked by the senseless apathy from Mamsell Mildväder, the lady turns away from her in silence. Next to her, Flaxa appears calm and distracted, letting her eyes wander away from her petulant care. So far, eventually the lady has to call them back to her. She asks what Flaxa is staring at. The clouds, she says. They look like white lambs, herded across the heavenly field. Every moment in the presence of Flaxa Mildväder has been a confusion for the lady. Never once has the old woman done or said as she expected, and never has she been able to put her finger on her. She could, in all honesty, not even have begun to guess what the old witch would have answered her. But even so, she did not foresee her saying those words. The lady's eyes stray from her aloof nurse and away from the castle, further away from here than she could have expected to see. When her eyes finally settle, it's on a place she hasn't visited for many years. She wonders if Mamsell Mildväder knew or not. Does Mamsell know I herded lambs as a child? As she speaks, she looks back to that distant field and remembers. Back then, before all of this, her voice was lighter and softer, with no bitterness or sadness to weigh it down. Now that same voice carries from all the way back then to now. I was poor back then, long, long ago. It was back when I wished I was going to be rich and have everything I ever wanted. I never thought it would come true, but I was given all of it. That's why I've stopped wishing. It's not just out of malice.
Man får nästan alltid det man önskar. Man vet bara inte hur eller när.
That sounds wrong on the face of it, but what she really means is a material wish is easily confused for a person's true desire. What I mean is there is always a reason why people wish for the things they wish for, and that reason is a person's true desire. And despite how complicated we like to make things for ourselves, really most people want some pretty simple things. Companionship, fun, and a sense of meaning to their lives, about themselves and about the people they care about. I think that's what she means, and that is far from a bad lesson to teach anyone. In this moment, the weight about the lady has slipped. But even so, circumstance won't let it last. A servant enters the room, carrying a glass of water and a plate full of pills, the signal the governess is about to sleep. Realizing this sets a fire under the lady's feet. She will not be in the presence of that so soon. Instead, she orders the servant to bring about the carriage, and let the lord know they're going for a drive. All of the symbolism and subtext of a film sometimes gets in the way of basic reasoning. In this case, there was nothing really keeping the lady in the castle. She could have left for a walk or gone for a ride at any time, really, but again I return to the castle as a metaphor for her isolation and powerlessness. Yes, she could have left at any time, and in the film she actually does leave at one point when she goes for a ride with the lord to see the children for the first time, but even then she is contained within an omnibus. This is the first time that she is out and about in the fresh air, and the scene just feels more liberating because of it. Gently trembling with the gravel road, and lulled by the rhythmic beats of the horse's hooves, the lady finds herself feeling like she's dreaming. Every now and again she lets out a contented sigh. Even in the presence of the Lord, she feels as free as the warm summer breeze gently rustling the fields around them as they journey through the greenery. It's spring, and nature has awoken with force around them. The spruce trees are elegantly spreading their mighty green branches, the birches are softly rustling, and the wild roses are blooming. Wistfully, she reminisces about how, as a child, she would pick the dog roses and sell them by the roadside. She'd only pick the buds that hadn't bloomed yet, so they'd last longer. Oh, how she wishes she had one of those bouquets. So relaxed is she doesn't watch her words.
Så fort vi kommer till en törnrosbuske så ska jag uppfylla din önskan. Den vackraste bukett med rosenknoppar ska bli din.
There's no real reason for me to include that clip, it just makes me laugh. True to his words, as soon as the white-clad brambles appear in the distance, giddy as a child the Lord disembarks the carriage to hunt for the perfect bouquet of dog rose buds. Well met by the vibrantly blooming roses, he pushes them aside to hunt for their infant siblings, all the while announcing his progress to the lady. The sharp stings and scratches don't become him. He's too happy to finally gift her again. But the more he searches, the less he finds the buds. Between the thorns, through the brambles, and with nowhere else to go, he even works his way through and underneath the bush, and falls head first into the bulbs, and... not one. Not a single bud is left, all of them have bloomed. But maybe he can solve it. Ruined, he returns to the lady, and tells her all of the buds have bloomed, but as soon as they come home, he will send servants out and find a bush with buds, if the lady can wait that long. All through his struggles, the lady has buried her face in her hand, trying best to pretend this isn't happening. But the more she hears, the more she raises her head, until at last she looks at him directly. No, I want them now. From you. At her words, the Lord all but whimpers. He can't. There aren't any. But maybe she can wish for something else. Maybe a bouquet of blooming... roses? The lady simply stares. But whatever the Lord thinks will come next, doesn't.
Tack för att du äntligen låter mig behålla min önskan.
The lady tells the Lord, by tonight the buds would have bloomed, and by tomorrow they would have lost their leaves. Now they're always going to be little rosebuds that will never bloom.
Tack för att jag får behålla dem.
This is a very beautiful moment, but I hold no shame in admitting for the longest time I did not understand it whatsoever. I think it means that a wish is only beautiful for as long as it remains a wish. Kind of like how a daydream is only meaningful for as long as it doesn't become real, but I'm not the only one who's confused.
Jag förstår inte det här riktigt.
In the book, the Lord says outright that he wants to understand, but leaving that unsaid in the movie, I think suggests at the very least he accepts it, and if anything, that is a start. Like the lady said, life isn't so simple that you can just solve it with a bit of hocus pocus, but a small change is still a first step, and it leaves us with enough hope that maybe they will solve it. And by God, do we need some hope right about now.